My name's Tim. I'm an addict.
Hello, Tim.
I apologise in advance. My voice makes me sound iller than I am. I feel perfectly fine. It's just the tail end of something. With any luck, it will last out for the half hour or so. I've been clean for 32 years, so I've certainly got experience of being over 8. I went to an over 8 meeting in a different fellowship, another substance fellowship, and it wasn't one I was a regular at, and people were sharing things like, in their little holiday home in France, it's next to a vineyard, and they go past the vineyard and it makes them want to drink, and they haven't been to a meeting in 6 months. Now that's the problem of no longer being a member of a 12-step fellowship, but just visiting one occasionally. That's an entirely different problem, and I have nothing to say about that. But I do have experience of running into problems myself, and I've known lots of people over the years. I've paid attention, and I've talked to a lot of people over the years. So I know what the pitfalls are. Maybe not all of them, but many of them. And I want to share some of those with you. Now, I know that there are some new people here, people in their first days, weeks, months and years. I had a sponsor once who said the first 10 years are the early days, and when I got to 10 years he said the first 20 years are the early days. So if your 14 years are not yet fixed, you're on track, it's fine. But lots of the problems that arise much later on in recovery have their roots right in the early days. You get a few things right then, and you'll save yourself considerable problems later on. And I think the first point is the notion of doing the steps properly. In one of the AA pieces of literature, there's an unfortunate line which suggests that the only step you can do fully is step 1, and the rest are gradual progress. I think it's the other way around. I think step 1 will always remain slightly elusive to an addict because the addiction is always there and is always lying. And you grasp it and then it's gone, and then you grasp it and then it's gone. It's the one that's slippery. The rest, either you're doing it or you're not. Either you've made every amend or you haven't. It's simply a fact. Either you, and now obviously there are amends that can't be made because I got half a dozen where it's a name and a shady face and I don't remember much. There isn't much to go on, so I can't find those people. Fine. If you can't find them, you write a letter as if to them, go and read it in a church or on the top of a hill or by a favourite tree, and be prepared for God to bring such a person into your life again. And people have become findable after 25, 27, even 30 years. Once a year, I go down the list of unfindables and look for them and spend a couple of hours racking my brains. And it's amazing because the internet is always changing. People become findable who were previously not findable. But the point is, the steps can be completed and don't have this notion of the secret that you'll tell one day or the defect that you'll get round to at some point. Deal with it now. That's the grown-up approach. And that will save an awful lot of problems later on. And you hear this, you hear people saying, I've been in the programme for 7 years, and they might have been attending meetings for 7 years. Now, if you've been attending meetings but not working the programme for 7 years and you're miserable, you will say the programme doesn't work. If you say, I've been attending meetings for 7 years and I'm miserable, someone can rightly say, well, attending meetings won't treat your addiction, so I'm not surprised you're not okay. The ego will get me to twist reality to make it seem as though the programme doesn't work in order to justify leaving. So I've got to be very careful to say things exactly as they are, to use words as they're intended, not to twist them. So it's doing the steps properly. Now, how long does that take? I've had sponsees that get through the first 9 steps and complete the last amend within 3 months, but it's rare because it takes a long time to rewire how one thinks and to get some clarity. Most people, it's about a year, 15 months, 18 months. But as long as one is diligent, keeps one's nose to the grindstone throughout that period. That's how long it took me first time, and I didn't relapse because I was surrendered to the program. It's the surrender which brings about sobriety. It's not which step you've got to, it's making solid progress. And one isn't in a race against other people, one's in a race against one's ego. If it takes me, as it did, a lot longer to learn some basic things than others, so be it. Nothing wrong with that. But I was diligent, and it was the diligence that kept me clean. Another thing, which I think is very important, there are some real basics in the program. So we use AA's program, slightly adapted, and in the big book, the business, as it were, begins on page 63. Everything up to then is interesting and necessary, but there's no action involved. It's very comfortable. Have a nice little read, have a read up, and then a chat with sponsor number 1 and then sponsor number 2 because sponsor number 1 didn't work out. It's all very cosy. But the business starts with step 3. 4 pages in, it is given you a solution to any resentment you ever have for the rest of your life. 4 pages. It's not hidden in a secret appendix. It's not in the restricted section of the Hogwarts library. It's there. 4 pages into the program. You count another page, it's given you a permanent and complete solution to fear. You get to the bottom of page 69, you're still only 6 pages in. It's giving you a solution to any misbehaviour and misconduct. And you get to page 87, and it gives you a troubleshooter for any problem in your life. Now, I was someone who, years into the programme, was still plagued periodically with resentments and fears and misbehaviour, misconduct, and with the appearance of problems. I hadn't even got the basics. I might have done some advanced fancy footwork, but I hadn't learnt really the basic tools of the programme. The answer to resentment is to drop my demands and expectations that reality be anything other than it is, and to make the decision to cheerfully accept reality as it is, however it may appear. It talks on page 133 that when trouble comes, we cheerfully capitalise it as an opportunity to demonstrate God's omnipotence, which is also partly the problem-solving thing. When a problem happens, I had a bad patch last year, but it wasn't really a bad patch. I made the decision as soon as the trouble arose. I said, God, you're going to solve this in the most brilliant, interesting way. I'm going to rub my hands and wait to see how you're going to solve this. And as it was happening, it took about 6 weeks to 2 months for it to work itself through. I refused to say, this is a problem. I'd say, I'm receiving some blessings right now. And my friends knew what I meant. It means, he's got some challenges. I had a friend, I saw a friend at a meeting a few weeks ago. He said, I'm facing a horrendous situation. I thought, well, if you class it as a horrendous situation, that's what you'll make it into. 3 days later, at another meeting, I'm facing a horrendous situation, he said again. So obviously calling it a horrendous situation wasn't working out very well for him. It was stuck. In those 6 weeks, I can't tell you how much I learned and how much changed. The answer to fear is to trust God, which means to stop thinking about the problem. In the same way, if ever you've had a problem and you've gone to a lawyer, I had a really nasty problem 20-odd years ago, and I happen to know a good lawyer in the domain in question. And I said, if I throw money at this, can you make it go away? He said, absolutely. My problem is solved at this point. Because I trusted him when he said, this will be fine. We threw some money at it and it went away. It was fine. And my job, when God says, I'll look after you, and we're told that God will look after us in the big book, my job is not to question that, but simply to believe it and say, okay, very good. I'm not going to trust my cynicism, because my cynicism has never been my friend. So I'm going to trust that it's going to be okay. And the other half of that deal is saying to God, you show me what I need to do, if anything, in the solving of this problem. And very often it's almost literally nothing except keep my big old nose out of it. And I've recently, I go through, I'm constantly going through the first 3 steps with sponsees. I always have a lot of sponsees. That's the trick to not relapsing after many years. Have loads of, more than is entirely comfortable and convenient. That's the number. So 1, 2 and 3 are just the bread and butter of everyday conversations. But I run through 4 through 9 very briefly once a quarter just to see what's crawling around in the woodwork. And I did one of those today, step 4, and I came up with 8 issues. And I'll do what I always do. I put them on a list and say to God, you deal with these. I'm not going to figure anything out. And I read the list every morning to remind myself of the 8 things I am not to think about. And when I do those lists, it's amazing. I come back 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, the problem is gone. Not because I've done anything, but because I've not done anything, because I've given it to God and say, you find the solution, then the solutions come. God can find a channel. He's very resourceful. I don't need to go to a special guru or read a special book. I'll be told what to read, and I'll see it in there. It'll be ordinary. It's always ordinary. The answer to misconduct, and that can cover a multitude, quite literally, of sins. The answer to misconduct, whether it's acting out in a particular area or something else, page 69, to say to God, what is my ideal? To be willing to grow towards it. And when you fall flat on your face, you go to God and say, I've done it again. Clearly, there's something missing here in my concept or my willingness. Help me with one of those. And then you forget about it and get on with it. And eventually, the behaviour improves. And I've already talked about the 4th thing, which is turning over a problem to God. But page 87 covers it very, very well, I found. When agitated or doubtful. Now, agitated is any form of emotional distress. Doubtful is not knowing what to do. And it says we ask for the right thought or action. And I'll be shown what the right thought or action is. The right thought is always the same. For everything that has been, thank you. For everything that shall be, yes. There we go. That establishes my peace of mind in the situation. Almost nothing that disturbs me needs me to think about it. So the job is usually to drop it and find something useful to get on with. My mind, if it's not given something useful to get on with, will eat itself alive. So I've got to be very careful. It's too powerful to be left to its own devices. But everything falls into one of those 2 things, disturbance or not knowing. If I don't know what to do, I say to God, what shall I do? It's not a complicated prayer. You don't need to learn Latin for that one. You say, what shall I do? And if God tells you, you're told. And if you're not told, that means that's an answer in itself. That means do nothing and wait. And I don't trouble myself if I'm not told what to do. It means I'm not meant to know yet what to do. And I've learnt to live with considerable uncertainty. My work life is very helpful in learning to deal with uncertainty because my work pipeline is rarely more than a day and a half of work. And I just have to trust that things will come in, and they come in. I don't market myself. I don't do anything. I just trust God and it comes in. Don't ask me how. And it's taught me how to live with considerable uncertainty. Do I know what I'm doing at work on Friday? No, because I have no work. But when I get to Friday, I'm sure something will have come in. And if it doesn't, it's fine. Other mistakes which have their root right at the beginning. I misunderstood the program, not because I think it was misrepresented to me, but for whatever reason. I thought the program was a set of tools that you bolted on to your ordinary life in order to upgrade it to a higher level. Now, the program is very obliging and the tools are very powerful. And so if you do that, it will indeed improve your everyday life and upgrade it to a high level. But that falls quite a long way short of the radical reorganisation of a spiritual awakening. And so I found myself at around 8 years clean, very competent at living, with lots of the psychological stuff apparently sorted out, but waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning with panic attacks. I'd become very good at living in a material sense, but it hadn't solved the spiritual problem. What it talks about in Bill's story, if you want a summary of the program in its most uncompromising terms, read the second half of Bill's story, because he sets it out brilliantly over 8 pages, and it's the potted summary. And so in Bill's story, his old friend Ebby Thatcher comes to visit him, and this chap is sitting in front of him, is completely transformed from the man he used to know. And Bill says, his roots grasped new soil. This person is not the same person on whom someone has poured baby bio. This is someone who's been repotted in entirely new soil. The old soil is the soil of self, of thinking that my job is to establish some security in the material world, get an income, get a pension, get some investments, get a bit of a buffer, get a career, get some qualifications, make progress, have some status, have some so-called achievement in the material world, get married, have a family, have a dog, have several cats, go on holidays to nice places more than once a year, have dinner parties with flash people, have a nice watch, have a spare nice watch, and the list goes on and on and on. That's the old soil. And that's how most of the world lives, and that's not working out for the world very well, if you pay attention. The new soil is fuck all of that. The new soil is I'm spirit that happens for 80 years and 10 perhaps to be running around in a physical body with work to do, whose significance does not lie in this realm but in the next. Whose significance is spiritual, can't be measured physically. One of the most important people I've ever met was a man who drove a minibus a few hours a week for a living, lived in a council flat in Poplar. On his bathroom wall had dozens of Bible quotes printed out on little post-it notes to remind himself of truth whenever he was in the bathroom. And he helped more people in AA more profoundly than anyone I've ever met. By the world standards, he was a failure. By spiritual standards, he was an absolute giant. So this is the new basis. What matters is what it says on page 15 of the big book, where it says, my wife and I abandoned ourselves. Now, that means they abandoned themselves, but it also means they abandoned their selves. They abandoned their concept of themselves as material beings running around the material world. To do what? Not to help other people. To help other people to a solution to their problems. I've never helped anyone. When I think I'm helping someone, I'm in trouble and they're in trouble. I help them to a solution of their problems, and the solution is God. I help people establish a relationship with God. If I try and help you directly, God help all of us. The worst thing is I'm good at it, and that makes me deadly. That's why I have to keep my finger out of all of those pots. Someone asked me for sponsorship the other day. I said, why? And he said, well, my current sponsor is very impersonal and hands-off. I said, you've got a good sponsor. The last thing you want is someone who's up in your business being willing for your recovery on your behalf because you're not willing, pointing out stuff you're unwilling to face because you're fundamentally dishonest. That's not going to help you. You want a sponsor that doesn't give a shit, but wants to give you time to help you establish a relationship with God. My first sponsor, I'm not sure he even knew my name. He used to call me Princess Parfait, and I think it's because, I don't know, I did what I was told, and I was a princess. So Princess Parfait. Business is business when it comes to sponsorship. But that's slightly off the topic. The point is, this is adopting an entirely new, for me, an entirely new way of life. What you do is up to you, I don't care. So if you do it differently, good luck to you. And people get results with different sorts of approaches. All I can do is say the approach I've adopted and the results I've got. If it's helpful, great. If it's not, that's fine too. I don't want to disturb anyone who is comfortable with the approach they have, which might be different. It's not my job. My job is only really to address those who are looking for something because there's a gap and there's something missing. Those people I might have something to say to. Because it wouldn't do for us all to be the same, as my ex's mother would say. Other problems, other things that can happen. On page 19 of the big book, there is a line which is greatly misunderstood. It says, a much more important demonstration of our principles lies in our respective homes, occupations and affairs. That doesn't mean that the homes, occupations and affairs are more important than carrying the message. It means the best way to carry the message is to be doing well in those other areas as the worked example of the fact that the God idea works. But I've got to be very, very clear. The number one relationship in my life is with God. Those other things that I do, I'm a dilettante. I go and do what needs to be done. But it's not where the weight is. The weight is on God. It's very common, I did this myself, lots of friends have done it, is the weight gets placed on homes, occupations and affairs, and you do a flyby through CA meetings and aerial bomb the meeting with little spiritual nuggets, but you're not really there. I've done that. I've got to keep the main thing. The other thing as well, there's a line somewhere in the literature about the last 3 steps being the maintenance steps. A friend of mine puts this very well. He says, by the time you've completed the first 9 steps, you haven't built anything. You've raised your previous life to the ground. There is nothing there. There is nothing, therefore, to maintain. The last 3 steps are there to build a life. And that involves 3 elements. In step 12, I've got to continue to grow spiritually through reading and listening and talking to God and listening to God. I've got to be helping other people, chiefly through sponsorship. Not all sponsorship is named as sponsorship. The people I've done, I think, the most good to have often been people I haven't sponsored, and the people who I actually sponsor, most of them avoid me like the plague. A friend of mine, I asked him, how many people do you sponsor? He said about 1/2 of them. And that's about the statistic. So to help other people to a solution to their problems, which is got to explain the programme and use their life as worked examples. So one isn't solving the problems, one's helping them apply the programme to their problems. And then practising these principles in all our affairs, which is very simple. It's largely being charitable in my attitude towards people, being diligent, keeping my head down, keeping my nose out of other people's business. That's about 95% of it. Everything else is small change. And 10 and 11, steps 10 and 11 are there to inform me what to do, to keep me on track during the day, and to debrief at the end of the day what went well, what went badly. Some other traps There's something I call the slow failure of materialism. Materialism, as I discussed earlier, the getting all the things which make you look like you've got a good life, or as was the habit in East London for a while, people were saying, I've got a big life, and I never really worked out what that meant, as though life has a magnitude in that way. I think all lives are the same size. But that will work for a while, and that's the problem. If materialism was a complete failure, people wouldn't get addicted to it. And materialism, I don't just mean the acquisition of things. I mean the belief that this material world is the only reality that can possibly exist. To believe that the spirit dies with death. That's a very depressing existential position. Because what's the may I swear, what's the fucking point in anything if your life is going to come to an end and in 200 years no one will remember you and the planet will be destroyed and the sun will burn out? What significance can anything have in that context? It's a dead philosophical position. You can only maintain it if you're deluded or psychotic or drugged. And then you wonder why so many people are drugged, legitimately or illegitimately. Well, that's a good reason why. That's a good explanation. Materialism doesn't work. But it fails slowly. If you boil the frog, it won't realise you're boiling the frog, and materialism is boiling the frog. But once you realise the mistake, the big book is there with its offer to repot you in the new soil of God. So it was there the whole time. Sometimes I would have great discoveries at sort of 20 years or 30 years of clean time. And then I'd go back and read a book that I read when I was 6 months clean. I thought, fuck me, it was in there the whole time. So it's not that people weren't showing me the truth. You're not ready until you're ready. There's no harm in that. You have to work things through. If it takes a long time, it takes a long time. Knock yourself out. And if other addictions and compulsions are still working, get it into you. You know, you've got to let it work itself through. Sometimes people get very austere, saying, you must stop everything at once and get control of your sugar and your nicotine and just stop everything. Good luck. And there are lots of other behaviours which might take a while to work through the system too, to be patient with that. If one is aware of the true value of things, that can speed things up, but you can't stop those addictive processes. I don't know how to stop them. You find yourself stopped at some point. If you find yourself stopped, do something about it, because you don't know when the next reprieve is going to be. The other mistakes that I've made, which led me up garden paths, is at a number of years of recovery, thinking I've outgrown recovery and I need something deeper. And I read lots of books and talked to some expensive people who were very good at what they did, but they're not good for people like me. I can get very wrapped up in myself. The answer was not in those external things for me. It was in doubling down on the simplicity of saying, God, I know nothing. You show me what to do today, and getting on with it like an idiot. And when I started doing that at 15, 16 years clean, I discovered myself as happy as I was in my first 6 weeks. So the happiness is always available. It's only my self-importance, the bloated nothingness of self, which is creating the problem. And you don't treat darkness by trying to sweep it with a spiritual broom. You have to turn the light on, and the light gets turned on when you're trying to help another addict who's shaking. That's when the light goes on. And also, not looking for highs. There are lots of ways of doing that. There's no such thing as a free lapse. Avoiding the ayahuasca is probably a good idea as well. Because that's about a subjective experience. real spirituality. Swansea said, and I'll finish in a couple of minutes, Swansea said yesterday, who'd completed step 9, I said, what effect has it had? And I thought he was going to say something emotional, and he didn't. He said, I have this horrible realisation I really need to be sponsoring more people. That's it. That's it. You know it's worked. The sense of responsibility. That's the result of a spiritual awakening. It's not unlocking the secrets of the universe. And the last thing is, it's amazing how many lines in recovery can be misused to brief against recovery. And one of them is where Bill, rather ill-advisedly, referred to AA as spiritual kindergarten, implying that if you want to continue to grow spiritually, you have to look outside. I know someone that looked outside and got very interesting with all sorts of spiritual things. He now charges $300 for a 20-minute consultation about how to align people's energies. There you go. So I would never dare in any way to try and monetize anything I've learnt in recovery. Everything must be given away, the whole product, for fun and for free. And I've tried to go down religious paths. Absolutely nothing wrong with religion. But religion seems to keep turning me back because my work is here. And I still use lots of religious stuff. But I'm just not very good at religion. It doesn't do it for me the way this does. This is where I belong. This is where I was placed. And if in doubt, grow where you're planted.